Got a Gen Zer on your sales team yet? If not, trust me, it's coming. Let's talk about managing a multi-generational sales team on this episode of Closing Time. Thanks for tuning into Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm Val Riley, head of marketing for Insightly, Unbounce, and LeadsRx. Today, I am joined by Tony Morando. He's a strategic sales leader and chief sales officer of World Emblem, a fast-growing apparel business. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Val, for having me.
You've built a career, Tony, in one place, rising through the ranks of one company, which isn't super common these days. Can you tell me a little bit about your career progression?
Sure, yeah. So right after college, I started working for a uniform supplier. I had a small market in Boston, Massachusetts, where I was selling uniforms to basically anybody you can imagine, whether it was food processing, manufacturing, safety, security. Had a pretty good 2-year career there, was promoted and moved out to San Diego, California, so opposite end of the country. During that promotion, I ended up taking a trip down to Florida to visit a friend, and met the owners of World Emblem randomly at a dinner, hit it off really well, and was offered a role that night working for the company. 20 years later, 5 promotions. I now head up sales for all of North America, Mexico, US, Canada. I oversee customer service, outside sales, inside sales, as well as our most recent acquisition.
Wow, so 5 promotions. Tell me what that was like.
It's been wild. Yeah, it's been really, really wild. I think the key is just surrounding yourself with some really good mentors. And fortunately for me, I was taken under the wings of Jamie Carr initially, who was co-owner of World Emblem. And he taught me a lot of good ways of doing business, a lot of bad ways of doing business. And I just think over the years, just surrounding yourself with the right people has really kind of led to at least my progression.
Yeah, that's great to hear. You know, so often we hear that, boy, you've got to jump around if you really want to advance your career, but you're a testament to maybe that's not always the case. So I'm always delighted to hear that.
Thank you. It's funny. We had an internal meeting this morning and we were talking about this, and I've got a bunch of great tenure on the team. So some people have been here 30 years, some people 20 years. And we were talking about it and asking, the reason why people never left. And a lot of it came down to the culture, right? The cultural fit for the individual ended up keeping them for such a long time.
Yeah, that's so true because, culture is the one thing you can't buy and sell, right? It has to evolve. It has to be organic. So you guys have something special going there for sure.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about your current role, CSO, right? Because so much of that role is really leadership and mentoring. So describe the type of team that you manage. You mentioned that there were some long tenured folks on there. Imagine maybe a couple of newbies as well.
Yeah, so currently I have a team of about 45. And again, that's spread out between Mexico, US, and Canada, all different age groups. I mean, we have people right out of high school to people towards the end of their career. And really it's unique not only from a age perspective, but also from a cultural perspective of where people are living. So a lot of it is adapting. What we're seeing is depending on the role, we are seeing that next gen come in, right? So we talk about the Gen Zers, which I know is the content of this call, but we're starting to see that now as we expand our team. So we are hitting our next growth phase where we're going to be hiring about 12 additional reps. And a lot of that is going to be Gen Zers.
Well, I'll hit you with this stat, the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And I realize you're in Canada and Mexico as well. But in the U.S., they say that Gen Z is going to make up 30% of the U.S. workforce by 2030. And I know that number sounds far away, but that's like 5 years. So it's really right around the corner. So talk to me a little bit about how you approach managing a Gen Zer versus maybe some of the more experienced members of your sales team.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time really looking at roles and responsibilities and bringing clarity around their role, right? So what we found is they really want collaboration amongst the different departments, constant feedback. So I feel like Gen Z really thrives in environments where they understand the why behind the work they're doing. And they also see a clear path for growth, right? It's really important that they're not stagnant. I know they're just starting their careers, but they also want to see where they can go 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And it's really important, I think, to visualize that for them versus somebody that's been here a long time. Obviously, they have a little more autonomy to make their own decisions unless it's something strategic that it requires me to help.
Yeah. So let's dig into that a little bit more. Keeping folks challenged can be a challenge. Constantly providing that mentoring or feedback or growth. Do you notice that with your Gen Z employees, it's a little bit more intense versus someone who maybe is a little bit farther along in their career?
I don't know if I would call it intense. I think the intensity level is probably the same. What I do see is a lot more questions, really. There's a lot more inquisitive aspect of how we're doing things, what we're doing, where we're going, why we're doing it, more so than the people that have longer tenure. But I really don't see it kind of extreme one way or the other.
So one thing I've seen, Tony, with some of those Gen Zers is a little bit too much of an attachment to the phone, right? Which, to their credit, they've really grown up with.
Yeah, and I think on that note, 100%, it's something that myself and the managers, as we're doing field trips with the Gen Zers, is, hey, you can't be on LinkedIn, you can't be on Instagram, you can't be on Facebook when you're with a client. And it's hard because the attachment to the phone is even as myself and older, like I have the phone checking emails, but they're checking their social medias and different platforms. And the one thing that we really stress is when we're with customers, that's you got to be focused on the customer. That's it. Leave your phone in the car. And it's something that kind of a process that we've been testing is telling the customers, our staff, not to bring the phones in the appointments for the reason that they can really focus on the customer. They're not checking the phones. And even if they don't think they're doing it, we still see them do it. It's just a bad habit.
Yeah, for sure. And the truth is they can probably multitask that, but the perception is not great. But, the opposite side of that is when you bring Gen Zers in, there's no problem adapting any platform. They really just are so tech native.
Yeah, we've seen that as well, too. So I think particularly with us, with our tech stacks, whether it's our CRM or our ERP, our websites, our e-com platforms, they tend to pick it up extremely fast with a matter of minutes, whereas some of the older generations that come in, they're not the most willing. They don't accept having to log into the CRM. It's more of a pain for them, which has been really fun.
Yeah, so just kind of sitting back and thinking about the 45 people on your team, you've probably, got a couple of boomers, a couple of Gen Xers, a couple of millennials, Gen Z. Just in thinking about how you approach those folks differently and their motivations differently, tell me about how you sort of context switch throughout the day. Or is it more on a day-to-day basis, or is it more during one-on-ones, or even zooming farther out when you're doing performance reviews? How do you engage with those generations differently?
What I've seen is that with the older generation, they tend to adapt pretty well to some slight changes, right? So what I've done with the Gen Zers is we have more frequent calls. So we have what we call a daily huddle, and just a daily check-in so the team can go through some highlights from the previous day, their one priority today. So it really keeps them focused, but it also allows them to get feedback from the rest of the team. So everybody's kind of integrating, but we're not adapting it for just the Gen Zers. What we're doing is adapting it for the whole team. And what we've seen is the process tends to work well with the older generation working with the younger generation versus, kind of changing it one by one.
I love that, actually, because it doesn't put the burden so much on you. It really does spread it out so that you're giving these younger folks who are just entering the workforce exposure to an older generation of workers through a daily huddle. So they get that mentorship, not just from you, but really from their peers as well on the team.
And I think that's the key, is the mentorship, right? You hit the nail on the head there, that they really want the feedback and they want somebody to help guide them. But when they get it from one perspective, I think it's not as influential as having a team of 15 different people guiding them and coaching them on all different perspectives. And they also seem to absorb it much faster than I've seen the older generation.
That's good. What's 1 point for Gen Z, right? Uh, so you say when you bring on a new team member, you've got like a 90-day coaching and training, onboarding plan that has some core pillars. Has that philosophy had to be adjusted at all for Gen Z? Or are most of those philosophies staying the same and maybe there's just some format differences?
Yeah, we haven't really changed the format. So things like accountability, customer obsession, performance metrics. I don't care if it's a Gen Z or somebody that's just starting around high school or somebody that, again, is at the end of their career. We really want to maintain the same accountability throughout the entire business and the entire team. Now, we did address some of the deliverables in terms of the content, how we're sharing it with the newer generation, right? So smaller pieces, more visual, more frequent check-ins. And what we've seen is that really kind of maintains engagement momentum. We just actually purchased a new software for us to roll out video training amongst the new hires coming on. And I think that has been so far extremely successful because they're able to watch and learn versus read a book or read a manual.
Yeah, definitely a good switch. We've been seeing that a lot. So the proliferation of video really making a difference. So this is more of a general question, but in thinking about the Gen Z folks, you know, there's so much of a tendency to, think poorly of a younger generation. But on the opposite side of that, what are some qualities that Gen Z has that might actually make them pretty suitable for a career in sales?
That's a great question. And I'll use the example. So, our CEO, his son, just came aboard our team about, I want to say 4 months ago. And one thing that he brought that I thought was really unique was his entrepreneurial attitude, right? So, in college, he had started his own business and it was all digital media. So, he created his own Instagram page, his own following, and his ability to really kind of take that technology and use it to help drive an entrepreneurial spirit within our customers has been really successful because it brings that consultative social selling approach that maybe the older generation has lost a little bit. I think that the Gen Z really has a way to sit, listen, and utilize that to kind of really drive consultative sales.
Oh, that's a great perspective. And we touched on this a little bit, but clearly the ability to pick up the tech stack of a company very quickly and run with it. There is such a tech stack in sales, regardless of what industry you're in. So just having them be so native to just picking up different software systems probably is a bonus in the column of Gen Z for a sales role as well.
It is, especially where we are very digital heavy. So our platform for most of our selling is through our e-com site, and being able to constantly update that and have the Gen Zers explain it to the end users in a very quick manner has been a big driver for some of our successes and our revenue growth. So we think that's only going to kind of expedite our growth strategy here over the next 3 years as we bring on there are half dozen to a dozen of Gen Zers within the next 6 months.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So I'll hit you with one last question.
Yeah.
Let's say you've got a colleague who's a sales leader who's about to bring on his or her first Gen Z salesperson. What couple of words of wisdom would you provide to that person?
Yeah, I think just be clear. Be very clear with what you're expecting from them. No hidden agenda. Be very open. It's something that I have with all of my staff is my phone is available at any time for anyone to call. Now, I'm not expecting calls at 7, 8 o'clock at night, but if something came up and they wanted to chat, I'm always willing to jump on a call with them and be able to provide constant feedback. I think that's really critical to maintain kind of their approach and their influence and their drive to want to do well within the business. I think that would be kind of the big points to call out.
Awesome. Tony, thank you for your time today. Thanks for helping our listeners out there get ready to welcome Gen Z into the workforce.
Thank you for having me.
Tony, if people want to keep up with you, where could they stay connected?
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best option. So it's Tony Morando on LinkedIn. There's only one of me, so you'll find me right away. Or if you go to our worldemblem.com page, you can find me there under contacts.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Feel free to sign up for the Closing Time newsletter to get this show delivered right to your inbox. We'll see you next week.